stubbornness. That is a trait that many have. Not too long ago, Sheila and I attended a funeral in Cicero for one of her cousins. And he was described in the funeral sermon as a very stubborn man who, and it said once he had an idea, you couldn't pry it out of him with a crowbar. After the funeral, I asked Sheila, I said, is this true? She goes, oh, yes, definitely. That described him to a T. Okay. And I thought that was an interesting thing. Sheila definitely agreed with the assessment by the preacher. And a part of this was his becoming a Christian. He held on to his faith. His family, a lot of them didn't have anything to do with him because he became a Christian. You know, don't have anything to do with that kind of church. And he hung on to it almost, I'll show you, I've made up my mind, this is what it takes to be saved, and I'm going to stick to it till I die, and he did. And we can also be stubbornly against God, which is not good. So how stubborn are we? The title of this lesson is A Stubborn Man. In Isaiah, the 48th chapter, in verse 1, I'm in Jeremiah. Let's go to, here we go. In verse 1 it says, hear ye this, O house of Jacob, which are called to the name of Israel, and are come forth out of the waters of Judah, which swear by the name of the Lord, and make mention of the God of Israel, but not in truth, nor in righteousness. For they call themselves of the holy city, and stay themselves upon the God of Israel, the Lord of hosts is his name. I have declared the former things from the beginning, and they went forth out of my mouth, and I showed them, I did them suddenly, and they came to pass, because I knew that thou art obstinate, and thy neck is an iron sinew, and thy brow brass. I have even from the beginning declared it to thee. Before it came to pass, I showed it thee, lest thou shouldest say, mine idol hath done them, and my graven image and my molten image hath commanded them. Thou hast heard, see all this, and I will not, and will not ye declare it? I have showed thee new things from this time, even hidden things, and thou didst not know them. They are created now, and not from the beginning, even before the day when thou hearest them not, lest thou shouldest say, behold, I knew them. Yea, thou heardest not, yea, thou knewest not, yea, from that time that thine ear was not opened. For I knew that thou wouldest deal very treacherously, and was called a transgressor from the wound. What does it mean to be obstinate? It means you're hard-headed. It's obstinate's a nice fancy way to say just plain old stubborn. And we have to realize that there are a lot of people that just held on to their idols. They said, these things are the gods. These are the things that created us. These are the things that did miracles for us and led us into the promised land, when it was God. You know, unfortunately, if you've ever seen an idol, you know, whether it's a fat Buddha or some other idol, they don't do much, because they're not made of anything but iron, wood. They might have a little paint on them. And you know what? If they're made out of wood, they might get termites. Can you imagine God getting termites? Well, God is not made of wood. God is not made of things that rust or corrode or is corrupted. We see that in evangelizing. Paul was in Rome. Acts 28 and 17, which is the end of Acts 17, it says, it came to pass after 3 days, Paul called the chief of the Jews together. And when they were come together, he said to them, men and brethren, though I have committed nothing against the people or customs of our fathers, yet was I delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans, who, when they had examined me, would have let me go, because there was no cause of death in me. But when the Jews spake against it, I was constrained to appeal unto Caesar, not that I had aught to accuse my nation of. For this cause, therefore, have I called to you, to see you, and to speak with you, because that for the hope of Israel I am bound with this chain. And they said to him, we neither received letters out of Judea concerning thee, neither any of the brethren that came showed or spake any harm of thee. But we desire to hear of thee what thou thinkest. For as concerning this sect, we know that everywhere it is spoken against. And when they had appointed him a day, there came many to him into his lodging, to whom he expounded and testified the kingdom of God, persuading them concerning Jesus, both out of the law of Moses and out of the prophets from morning till evening. And some believed the things which were spoken, and some believed not. And when they agreed not among themselves, they departed. After that, Paul had spoken one word, well spake the Holy Ghost by Isaiah the prophet unto our father, saying, Go unto the people and say, Hearing you shall hear and shall not understand, and seeing you shall see and not perceive, for the heart of this people is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have they closed, lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. Be it known, therefore, unto you that the salvation of God is sent to the Gentiles, and that they will hear it. And when he had said these words, the Jews departed and had great reasoning among themselves. They heard the evidences. Paul would be reasoning from them from the prophets and saying, here's what the prophecies say. Here's what was fulfilled. Why don't you believe? Some did, and some were stubborn. And then they were butting heads against each other. They could not agree. And that, unfortunately, is the way a lot of people are. In Acts 26 and verse 24, and as he thus spake for himself, Paul had spoken in a defense. Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning hath made thee mad. And he said, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. For the king knoweth these things, before whom also I speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him. For this thing was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? I know that thou believest. Then Agrippa said to Paul, Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. And Paul said, I would of God, not only you, but also all that hear me this day were both almost and altogether such as I am, except these bonds. Agrippa knew the prophecies, and he knew in his heart they had come true, but he didn't become a Christian. Was Agrippa stubborn? Probably, because he knew those prophecies. But he rejected them. And what would have happened if he had become a Christian? He had a lot that he would have likely lost. He probably wouldn't have been a king anymore. He might have even lost his own life, but he would have gained his soul. He picked what he wanted. Matthew 7, it talks about those who reject God. There are those out there that say Jesus is a man-made myth. Matthew 7 and verse 13, it says, Enter you in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction. And many there be that which go in thereat, because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. I've talked about my atheist cousin, who gets on the Facebook, and he's the neighborhood atheist. He's trying to convert people to nothing. And he didn't like it when after he said Jesus was a man-made myth on the Facebook. I told him, your unbelief is a form of faith, you know. You have more faith than some Christians do in that there's not a God. Why do people reject him? And I'll tell you, Satan works very hard to make people not believe. He works very hard at it. In Matthew 13, we have the parable of the sower. We had different kinds of seed, and some of the seeds are devoured. In verse 4 of Matthew 13, When he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. And he explains that in verse 18. Hear you therefore the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one, and catcheth away that which is sown in his heart. This is he which receives seed by the wayside. In other words, Satan grabs it before you think about it, puts things in your heart that you won't listen to it or consider it. There are a lot of people that will be in that situation on Judgment Day because Satan is stubborn too. He will go to any lengths to get rid of a soul's salvation. Now, he left Jesus, in Matthew 4, He was led up to in verse 1 of Matthew 4. Then was Jesus led up by the Spirit to the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward hungered. And when the tempter came to him, he said, If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. But he answered and said, It is written, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word which proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Then the devil taketh him up into the holy city, and sitteth him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, He shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot up against a stone. And Jesus said to him, It is written again, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Again the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world, and the glory of them, and said to him, All these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Then said Jesus to him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Then the devil leaveth him. And behold, angels came and ministered unto him. Satan may have left him, but there were great temptations. He might leave you for a while, but he's going to come back and see if he can get you. Until you have drawn your last breath, he's gone after you. And that's the thing that we have to realize is we don't always. He never stops from trying to destroy us. 1 Peter 5 and verse 6. What is Satan? He's a roaring lion. Verse 6 it says, Humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, like a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Whom resist steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. In other words, he never stops. Until we're done with this world, he's always going to try. Even at the last possible moment, he's going to try. Satan's going to be punished forever and ever. We read that in Revelation 20, when we did the series. He's going to be punished day and night. And he already knows his fate. He knows he's going to be tortured in hell forever, and he would like to have company. And it is a sick, insane idea when he could just repent. Could you imagine if Satan repented? And the demons that serve him, the devil and his angels, how much better off we would be? Unfortunately, he's not that way. He wants nothing more than to take us with him. Now, those are that's bad stubbornness, to be like Satan or to be like Agrippa. But we need a good stubbornness, to be stubborn till the end for righteousness. 1 Corinthians 9 and 24. Verse 24 of 1 Corinthians 9. It says, Also it is written in the law of Moses, Thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Does God take care for oxen? Or saith he it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt. This is written that he that ploweth should plow no more, and he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. If we have, I'm in verse 11, go to verse 24. Know ye not that they which run a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? So run that you may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beeth there. But I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. Our service is lifelong. We stick to it to the end. We're not discharged from service until we die. And it's something, Revelation 2 and 10 says to be faithful unto the end, even if it causes our end in the world. Because our journey to heaven is the transformation from a lost state to that of a saved state, to taking the proper path to heaven. Why does Jesus say that in Matthew 7, 13 and 14? It might be a windy way, it might be a difficult way in comparison to just going with the flow into hell. You take the more windy road to get yourself to heaven, to stick to the old paths. We talk about evangelism, and we did a lesson series on evangelism, and to guide people to that heavenly path. There are people out there who are lost that need guidance, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't need that guidance. Yes, you do. We all need guidance. We all need to know. Jeremiah 6, it talks about to stick to the old paths, to stick to them, even though others may try to get you off of them. We don't want to get off of the way to heaven. It's a path. It's a route to get to a place that we want to be forever. The persecutions may come, but we can never give up. Why? Because how long can they torture you? If you live 70 years, how long are you going to live? Now, if you're over 70, you might say, well, maybe it's a little, but even if you live by force of strength another 20, 30 years beyond 70, it's not that long. Why be faithful unto death, as we read in Revelation 10, 2 and verse 10? Why in Matthew 10 does it say in verse 16? Matthew 10 and 16, it says, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues, and you shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what you shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour what you shall speak. For it is not you that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you. If the brother shall deliver up the brother to death, and the father the child, and his children shall rise up against their parents, and cause them to be put to death, and you shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. But he that endureth to the end shall be saved. We can endure. We can make it. There's no temptation that God allows us to be subject to that we cannot endure. You don't retire from being a Christian. There's no 401k. I guess if it's God as a 401g or a 401h for heaven, we don't have that. We follow the commandments. We worship. We teach others, as we often quote in 2 Timothy 4, preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and doctrine. Why do we say these things? To preach that word, because we always preach to people, even if we don't say a word. Did a lesson not too long ago about what is a true sin, and one of the sins is a sin of omission. Not telling others, not In other words, in inaction, not doing the things that we ought to do. Are we a shining light to the world? Or are we a dim star that people notice he should be shiny in his faith, but he's dull, even dark? Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, not to be cast out, but to be trodden under foot of men. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Are we shiny or are we black? Because there's really no in between. We're either really shiny or we're really not. We need to continue our stubbornness in serving God with energy, with faith. We need to show the world that we really like being Christians. We really want to be God's people, and we really want you to be with us. You know, in 1 Peter 4, what does it say in verse 18? The righteous are scarcely saved. Think of the greatest Christian you ever knew. Maybe it was a preacher. Maybe it was your father or mother. Maybe it was someone that you just looked up to because they were so sound in the faith. But you know what? Just as in Romans 3:23 says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. The person you might think of as super Christian, he has a big SC on his chest. Maybe he has a flowing cape. And he's barely going to make it. What does that make us? We got to get to that point as well. So don't let go of your faith. Strengthen it. Use it. It's time to teach others. It's time to teach ourselves. And that's our lesson. The invitation song selected. The invitation applies to you in any fashion. Please come forward and make your wants known while we stand and while we sing.